Welcome to In Behalf of Animals. I'm Nicole Arcello. Before we dive into today's conversation, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you all for the incredible outpouring of support following our first episode. Your messages, shares, and reviews mean the world to us, and we're so grateful that you're here, standing with us in the fight for animal liberation. Today, I'm excited to introduce the first of many guests, Jodie Wiederkehr. Jodie's journey is a powerful example of what can be achieved with determination and relentless advocacy for those who have no voice. Our conversation focuses on the cruelty of the horse carriage industry, but we also talk about two other urgent animal issues: individual animals who need our help right now. Whether you're looking for ways to fit advocacy into your busy schedule or you're ready to deepen your commitment, Jodie offers practical, inspiring advice on how you could take meaningful action starting today. We've included some steps you can take immediately in the show notes, along with more information about Jodie and her organizations, and you can find more on our website, inbehalfofanimals.org, on our blog. By the end of this episode, you will feel motivated and empowered. So let's jump in with Jodie now. Jodie, welcome to In Behalf of Animals.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your interest in talking to me.
I'm so excited for you to be here, and I'm sure you will be back quite a bit. So just so you know,
Okay.
you're a tireless activist. You have multiple organizations, multiple campaigns, daily actions for people to take for animals, and a weekly radio show about animal issues. And we'll get to some of that. That's a lot. But today we are talking mostly about horse carriages. So I want to start out by asking you to take us through a typical day in the life of a horse who is used for carriage rides.
Okay. Well, obviously, some cities are different than others, but I'll tell you what I know about Chicago. And I think this would be comparable to many major cities. But in Chicago, there were laws on the books to protect the horses and the public. And one of the laws was how long the horses could work. And that law was that they could only work 6 hours in a 24-hour period. And what we started documenting in August of 2017 is that the horses would arrive at the horse carriage stand downtown Chicago in the middle of Michigan Avenue traffic and pedestrians and tourists approximately 9:30, 10 a.m. on weekends. And so we would document when they arrived. And what we found is that they were working these horses more than 12 hours, more than double what Chicago's law allowed. So, and another thing we witnessed is not only were they breaking that law, but they were rarely providing water. The reason for that, we believe, is that they didn't want them urinating on the street. There were laws, if they urinated on the street, that the carriage operator had stopped the carriage and pour down a soapy solution. And so they didn't want them urinating, so they were rarely given water. And we documented this a lot and proved this to the city, and they were actually cited and fined. So imagine being 1,000+ pound horse in a major city. Chicago's the third largest city in the United States. You are forced to trot from your stable, which is basically a cage just bigger than a cage. A stall is just bigger than a horse. So it's like a cage for a horse, a good half hour or so to get to the carriage stand. And then you are either standing around or giving rides, forced to pull carriage and people around all day for more than 12 hours. And you're around motorcycles and emergency vehicles and city buses and garbage trucks and a lot of pedestrians. And horses are prey animals. They're 1,000+ pound prey animals who spook easily. And they're in this very loud urban environment. So those are just some of the things that we know these horses go through. And then after working a 12+ hour day, they go back to a cage where we don't even know if they could lie down comfortably at all. They had no turnout in Chicago. There was no law regarding turnout, which would allow them to be in grass or pasture where they could run, play with others, lie down, roll in the grass. There was no requirement for that in Chicago. And I know many other major cities, horses have a similar fate where after working on the streets all day, they go back into a dingy warehouse uh, without grass under their feet, without being able to stretch, without being free from this exploitation.
It's really awful. And I think a lot of people don't, maybe people aren't aware of this issue because maybe there isn't horse carriages in their city and they're not seeing it. But when they travel, they definitely will see this and they think it's this romantic, thing to do. What happens to the horses after this industry is done with them? I'm sure they're too slow and in their minds, the horses, they're useless. They're not money makers anymore. What do they do?
Well, as you know well, and many people who work in animal advocacy know that when horses can no longer provide a profit for their owners, there is no use for them. There is no money put into a horse if they are lame or if they break a limb. There's no money put into these horses. So I don't have statistics on Chicago's carriage horses, but it's very likely that they end up being dumped in kill pens or possibly sent overseas to be slaughtered for meat. Again, there is when we work on bans around the world, the pro horse carriage industry will say to us, well, if they don't have a job, well, then they're going to go to slaughter or they're going to, nothing good. They'll go to the glue factory, they'll say.
Mm.
So we say our response to that is if they don't have a job and you're going to send them to the glue factory, what happens when they're too lame and too old to pull a carriage? What happens then? Because they always say, well, there's no money if they're not pulling a carriage. Well, then where's the money to care for the old horses or the lame horses
Right.
when when they can't do the job anymore? So we know as activists that, and we'll tell everybody this, we will find homes for these horses when we get bans. However, at the end of the day, these horses are owned animals. Unfortunately, horse animals are property.
Mm.
So if the horses do end up going to a kill pen or being slaughtered, that is on the owners. We have offered homes. We will always work with the owners of these horse carriage companies to find homes, rescue sanctuaries for the horses. We will raise the money to do so. But at the end of the day, if the owners are not willing to work with animal advocates, are not willing to allow these horses to go to sanctuaries or rescues, and they end up in a bad place, that is completely on the owners, not on animal advocates.
Right. It's always the same story. If we weren't abusing them, well, then they wouldn't exist, right? But they're
Yeah,
born into this.
yeah,
So you had a groundbreaking victory in Chicago in April of 2020. Chicago City Council voted overwhelmingly 46-4, is that right? To ban horse carriages in the city beginning under a year later, January 1st. So this is like victory on top of victory on top of victory. Usually these are phase outs that are a number of years. So that's the short story of it all. So tell us how you accomplished this in a very short period of time, too.
sure. Well, the Chicago Alliance for Animals formed in May of 2015, and there was a group of us that formed it together. And it was actually my suggestion that horse carriages be our first campaign because it's kind of low hanging fruit. Obviously, big agriculture and animal experimentation are two issues I'd love to see go by the wayside, but those are going to be harder. So we started doing monthly outreach down by the horse carriage stand, very peaceful, friendly outreach where we held signs, handed out flyers, asked people to sign our in-person petition, give us video testimonials about why they would like to see horse carriages banned in Chicago. And we did this for about 2 years. And we also reached out to the mayor's office. We reached out to aldermen, the two aldermen where the horses worked and were stabled. We could not get a meeting with them because we were not their constituents. The mayor's office refused to respond to us ever. And so my good friend and volunteer, Barbara Whelan Krantz, who I called my right-hand woman, she and I were in Washington, D.C. at the National Animal Rights Conference. And it was kind of a slow time. We were sitting at our booth and we were just discussing the campaign. And we decided we have to pick our game up. Our monthly outreach and trying to get meetings with the officials was just not cutting it. And we decided right then and there, we picked a date in August when we got home, and we were going to go down to the horse carriage stand very early and document when the horses arrived. And we read up on all of Chicago's laws and regulations regarding the trade. And what we realized was Chicago's laws were pretty progressive compared to other cities. For example, in Chicago, the temperature they could work at, they could not work them above 90 degrees in the summer. In Dallas, Texas, that temperature is 100 degrees. So, but that doesn't mean they enforce the law. And so we went down, we documented that the horses were being overworked every single time they were out. They worked them when it was too hot. They worked them on streets they weren't allowed. So there were laws on the books to protect the horses and also to protect the public, but none of those laws were being enforced. So by going down and documenting these violations and then sharing them with the mayor's office and the city council, we proved to them that the city agency that was tasked with enforcing these laws was a Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 agency. They weren't down at the horse carriage stand on Saturdays and Sundays when the horses were being overworked. They weren't down there on the 4th of July when the horses were being worked in too hot of weather. So a combination of documenting the violations and then sharing those violations with the city council, doing what we started in, it all started in 2017. August 2017 is when we started documenting the horses and the violations. I believe it was October of 2017, I started what I called daily action alerts, DAAs, where every day we would pick a target. So say one day would be the mayor of Chicago. The next day would be the first ward, next day, second ward. And I provide all of the contact information for that official. And I urge everybody to take action one way. So either make one phone call, send one email, send a Facebook message, send a tweet, send an Instagram message, contact them through their website. And anybody can do these actions.
Oh, I was just going to ask one little thing, just to, not to interrupt, but when you say everybody, were you posting these on social media so people that weren't even in Chicago were taking action, or?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because it's a tourist industry. So what I tell people is you can simply tell them, you can say one sentence, please ban horse carriages in Chicago. Or you can say your name. You can say, I live in Toronto and I love Chicago, but I'm not going to visit. I'm not going to spend my tourism dollars in Chicago until horses are no longer exploited on Chicago streets. So people can put as much time into these as they want. They can share a recent accident or fatality, or they can simply say one sentence. That's all it takes. And just by one method, one way of contacting them. And so I think between these DAAs, documenting the violations, and then we started testifying before the city council, submitting public comment. And we did this every month for 2 years.
Wow.
We got the bill introduced in December of 2017 because we showed the aldermen where the horses work, all these violations. And we actually got it on the agenda to be voted on in September of 2018. So just 9 months after the bill was introduced.
Wow.
Unfortunately, after a 4.5-hour hearing, the chair of the committee blocked a vote. We had enough votes to pass it, and she blocked. So we just kept going, and we got it on the agenda. We had to wait until March of 2020 to get it heard again in the committee where it was sitting, the license committee. But then COVID hit. COVID literally hit the day we got it passed out of the committee unanimously. And that scared me to no end because I was so worried that the city council might feel sorry for the operators because they weren't being able to make any money because everything was shut down.
Yeah.
But
what a complication.
yeah. So 1 week after our agenda, it passed through the committee unanimously. It was supposed to go to the whole city council for a vote. And we were sure it would pass, but it got delayed and because of COVID.
Oh.
So luckily we got it done in May.
That is awesome. And then fast forward, so big victory, biggest city in the US, right? That had with a ban on horse carriages. And then fast forward to January 1st. So what happened? Did it go
Uh,
smoothly, or did you have to be out
well,
there to make sure they were shut down?
in all honesty, because of COVID,
Mm,
they had that phase out from April till January 1st of 2021, but they weren't out hardly at all because of COVID.
mm.
They couldn't really work, and obviously my organization and every animal rights organization, our goal is not to put people out of work or to end small businesses. But when your business relies on animal exploitation or animal suffering to make a profit, then it's time to reevaluate your business and transition to something more humane. And that was our goal. And so January 1st came along and they were just gone. And I would go down routinely to check. And of course, I had all my Chicago volunteers on alert to let me know if they ever saw any horses working. Since that date, we have heard about a couple carriage rides, and it's illegal in any way, shape, and form. Not only as a tourist trade downtown, but they cannot be rented in the city for weddings, for any events. And we
Oh,
were alerted to a couple. There was at one Halloween, someone had rented one as like a Cinderella type Halloween costume. And, we alerted this to the officials, but unless we can catch them in the act, it's kind of hard. But it's only happened a couple times. And of course, we're keeping our eyes open and we'll report it and urge the city to cite and fine any operators who are breaking Chicago's law.
so was that your idea to put that in the legislation to have no private use,
It was
hire
actually,
horse carriage hire? I guess I don't know how to say
yeah,
that, but it didn't
it
occur to
wasn't
me to. So,
ideally that is our goal, but the way the law was written was simply that they took out the language in Chicago's code that all the language about horse carriage regulations, they just took it out. So there was no way anybody can drive or ride in a horse carriage in the city limits.
oh, that is amazing. I
Yeah,
it didn't even occur to me that for weddings or some, or other events that people could still try to do this. So
you're right.
that's
Mhm.
that's that's just amazing. So,
So it really is a very progressive law here in Chicago compared to other cities that have passed them that still might allow for special events
ah,
or and parades and things like that.
I just have to say this is grassroots activism at its finest because activism works. You and I can say that it does. We know that, the Margaret Mead quote, a small group of people can change the world, and it
Exactly.
can.
Yeah.
So okay, so now you have partnership to ban horse carriages worldwide, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that. So how many cities are you working in the US or across the country? Tell us about how many cities have horse carriage operations.
Well, there are many cities that still have the horse carriage operations. I don't couldn't even gather a number, but unfortunately, there are a lot more than there are bans. But after again, how I said everything started in 2017. That's when I formed the partnership. I think that was November of 2017.
Mhm.
And I reached out to anybody and everybody I could around the world. If I could find a band horse carriage page or anybody working on this, I reached out and said, "Hey, let's work together. Let's share campaign strategies." And 1 month later, we got a bill introduced. So our our strategies were working. And so I I have formed ban horse carriages chapters throughout the world. I guide my Philly activists. I urged Stephanie Curson to take on this campaign.
That's
Uh,
Revolution Philadelphia, right?
yeah,
Revolution
and
Philadelphia.
she and Tiffany, who was running Revolution Philadelphia, worked together and they implemented a lot of CAA strategies. And they don't have a ban yet, but they got the horses off the street. So there are no horses working in Philly. And I hope that they do get a ban in place because if New York City ever gets a ban, I worry that some of the operators or owners might try to transition to Philly or Boston or some of these other cities where Boston rarely has a presence. They are working to get a ban in Boston too. But my Dallas partner, Gloria Raquel Carbajal, and my Savannah partners are really working hard. I really hope we can get Savannah and Dallas banned by the end of this year. I'm also working with, like I said, Boston, Charleston. I have a great volunteer there and in Indy who are working to on campaigns and implementing our strategies, such as the DAAs, the 1 hour educational outreach a month, testifying before city council, documenting violations. And I just recently picked up a new volunteer in Vancouver and St. Augustine, Florida.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
I have chapters in New York City, Krakow, Poland, Atlanta, New Orleans, and I'm always looking for volunteers to help me in those cities. And keep in mind that when we worked on our campaign in Chicago, none of us got paid. We all worked full time. We we did it when we could, and we didn't have we didn't have any accidents or fatalities during our campaign. Now, obviously, an accident or fatality will help ban horse carriages, but nobody wants that. Nobody wants to see a horse collapse or humans rush to the ER. So you can do this. Anybody can do this in their city. And I recommend putting in 1 hour a week. There's 24 hours in a day. Anybody
Yeah.
can put in 1 hour a week.
Yeah, there's always pockets of time in the day, and that's what our podcast is about: is being a voice for the animals every chance you get. And you're all about that, with your daily action DAAs,
Action alert.
daily action alerts. That's right.
Yeah.
Can you speak to what happened in New York City at all? I know one of Mayor De Blasio's campaign promises was to do away with horse carriages. In a city as big as New York, maybe there was political aspects that affected the campaign. Were there celebrities or prominent people instrumental in defeating the initiative? I mean, I know this has been ongoing for a lot of years. So, can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The whole New York City issue makes me incredibly sad. Obviously, their trade is bigger than any city. It was a lot bigger than Chicago's. However, and they're up against the unions, and that's their biggest obstacle. However, I don't know how, if they're documenting violations. I think that is key. Is you've got to get out there and from morning to night. That we didn't want to do it. We spent multiple Saturdays getting to the horse carriage stand at 8:39 in the morning, and we were still there at 1 a.m. on Sunday morning, documenting the violations and documenting the fact that this horse got here at 9 and it's now 12:30 at night. And we would narrate our videos and say, and that's, I mean, without the documenting of the violations, we would not, the horses would still be downtown on Chicago streets. That is necessary in any city to prove that there are violations. And I will tell you, every city, every horse carriage operator violates the law, period.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whether it's overworking, not providing water, not providing breaks, going down streets they don't belong. There are violations out there and they can be found, and that's critical to your campaign. I hope New York does it. I have done everything can to help New York City. I hope they're out documenting violations and then proving that to the mayor, because some people have told me Chicago has such a progressive city council. You know, that's not why we got our ban.
Right.
Chicago's city council is not an animal rights city council.
Right.
And the fact that we won 46-4 speaks volumes. It's not that they all loved horses. It's that we proved about the violations and the dangers. That's another aspect, is to
Mhm.
prove every time there's a fatality or an accident, it doesn't matter where it happens. You share it with your officials, because your officials will say to you, we don't want to hear from people outside New York City or outside whatever city you're working on.
Right.
We don't want, we don't care that there was a fatality in New Orleans. Well, too bad. We're going to tell you about it, because it doesn't matter where these things happen. It's the same industry.
Right.
It's the same
Same setting.
busy,
Right.
yes,
Yeah.
urban settings.
Mhm.
So officials will always tell you they don't want to hear from you, or they don't care that an accident happened in a city outside their jurisdiction. That's what officials do. They don't want to hear from
Mhm.
the public, but we
Right.
have every right to share that information and to keep that pressure on. So that's what I urge anyone working on campaigns, whether it's horse carriages, horse racing, animal circuses, is
Mhm.
you have to constantly reach out to those officials, and don't let them tell you, We don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear from people, anywhere. Everybody has a right to contact officials in support of animal welfare, animal protection, and animal advocacy.
That's right. Our officials need to know what we care about, and we need to tell them again and again and again. And they do have to listen. They have to mark it down. They have to listen. And you're right. They will give you pushback, but that squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And
Right.
that's what it's all
Yeah,
about.
exactly. And some advocates think that when an official tells them, oh, if you have people contacting us who don't live in this town, we're not going to pass a ban. That is a scare tactic.
Oh,
That
yes.
they're telling you that because they're sick of hearing, getting 15, 20, 50 emails, phone calls, tweets, Facebook messages a day. Do not let that stop you. I can't stress that enough.
Right. Yes, and they will. They will do that. We just have to do something every single day. And sometimes it's a big something like being out there at 1 a.m., right? And
Yeah,
documenting. And that'll be for a short time. That's when it's crunch time and you have to get all that. But then after that, it could be an hour a week or whatever. And
yeah,
we need people of all, time dedications to do these things. So
right. Sorry to interrupt. And
no,
I
go
just want
ahead.
to say that you don't have to run the campaign to help. If you are on Facebook or, well, that's how I post my actions is on Facebook.
Yes.
So
Hmm.
if you're not, I urge you to be on because Facebook is a great tool for advocacy. But if you can know how to send an email, if you know how to make a phone call, you can take action.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people might look at my DAAs because I provide a lot of information and they'll say, that's overwhelming. I don't know how to do it. Again, if you know how to make a phone call, send an email. If you're on Facebook, you know how to comment on a post, then you know how to do the DAA because you can send a message to an official. And again, it's one sentence. So where I say today's DAA is to urge the mayor of St. Augustine to ban horse carriages. And then I provide her phone number, her email address. So just make that call and say, I'm urging the mayor to ban horse carriages. Thank you. Goodbye. It's that simple.
And that's it. You don't have to be an expert. And this
No.
is something that's so important for our listeners to know as we're all about empowering people to fight for the animals is you don't have to be an expert in any of this. So you're listening today, you're learning about horse carriages, you may learn about you will learn about other animal issues as you listen on, but you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to read books about it. You don't have to scour the internet. You don't have to do your own research because when we do actions like your daily action alerts, everything's there. There's a script, there's
Yeah.
contact information.
Yes.
You helped us form the Horse Racing Wrongs Action Group. And a lot of times, what we do on there is sometimes people will say, oh, I don't know how to copy and paste something. I say, then DM me your email address and I copy it and throw it in an email because they can copy and paste better out of it. I don't care what I have to
Yeah.
do extra as long as they can make it easier for them, but we take every opportunity to make it easy. And I think that's so important.
Exactly. And I tell people do what you're comfortable with.
Yes.
If you don't want to make the call because you're uncomfortable talking, again, I always say Facebook Messenger is the easiest. You just click, I provide the link, you
Yes.
just click on it, their page pulls up, you see message and you click message and you say, please ban horse carriages or email, and again, you don't have to be like, I love that you said you don't have to be an expert. We are the ones providing the information. So it literally is one sentence. So please ban horse racing. Please ban the sale of fur in Chicago. We're trying to ban the sale of fur here now too.
So what else are you working on like right now? I know you have daily action alerts that could vary day to day from one end of the animal rights spectrum to the other and back and forth and in between. But what besides horse carriages, what else you mentioned a fur ban in Chicago?
Yep.
What else
We
are you on?
we are trying to pass the a bill to ban the sale of new fur in Chicago. We have 21 latest count, 21 co-sponsors. There's 50 aldermen in Chicago, so we're almost halfway there. So
Awesome.
if you're listening and you're a Chicago resident, we really need you to contact your city council member and urge them to sign on as a co-sponsor. You don't even have to know the name of the bill. You could just say the bill to ban the sale of new fur in Chicago. If you are not a Chicago resident and you live anywhere else, please call either the mayor of Chicago or email Mayor Brandon Johnson or the 50th Ward Alderperson, Deborah Silverstein. I don't have her contact info
We'll put it in the
handy.
show notes so people can
I can
get all
definitely
of
do
this
that.
information. Yes.
She is the chair of the license committee where the bill, as this bill is sitting, and she was a co-sponsor on the bill to ban horse carriages and the bill that we helped pass to shut down the puppy mill stores in Chicago, which was another big success of ours. So she is a compassionate individual. She just needs a little extra pressure to get her to co-sponsor and put it on the agenda.
Good.
We are also working hard to get the village of Lincolnwood, which is basically the furthest northwest on the edge of Chicago, the first village, very tiny town, but they have two laws on their books. One, prohibits the sale of wild animals, and the other law is a Cook County law that prohibits the sale of rabbits. They waived their own laws. They have not enforced the Cook County rabbit law for more than 6 years now. And meanwhile, an animal rescue that's only a couple miles east of the village here in Chicago is inundated with rabbits that people buy from pet stores, from the pet store in Lincolnwood called the Animal Store, and they dump them because they realize that rabbits are not an easy pet. They're considered an exotic animal, so they have to be taken to an exotic veterinarian. And every year, Red Door Animal Shelter keeps track all the rabbits that they rescue that are abandoned and that people dump. So every year that number is around 1,000 rabbits.
Wow.
And we've been testifying before Lincolnwood's Board of Trustees for more than 2 years now. We've told them every story about rabbits who have, been dumped, rabbits that have lost limbs, and all of the horrible stories out there. And they are unmoved. It's unbelievable and what's really sad is they seem to be very progressive on social issues like LGBTQ community and other cultures and religions. Yet when it comes to animals, they seem to be absolutely heartless.
Mm.
And on top of that, Spur, the tortoise, is a huge sulcata tortoise who was stolen from Africa, stolen from her home and family, and plopped into a display case in the animal store in Lincolnwood. This display case is approximately 3 by 5 feet. She has nothing natural about her life. All she has is hay and sometimes a heat lamp or a sun lamp. We're not sure which. She
That's
has nothing
awful.
that she cannot burrow like sulcata tortoises like to do. She cannot roam. Sulcata tortoises are slow, but they like to roam for miles every day.
Mm.
And she is stuck in a display case to be used as a prop to get people to come into this store. And they waived their law when we brought this to their attention it was March of 2022. They literally voted to waive their own law, and that is keeping her in a prison. And we have a sanctuary in Arizona where the temperature would be comparable, the climate and everything about it would be comparable to her home in Africa. The sanctuary will take her. It would cost the village nothing. CAA would transport her safely to Arizona. They don't care.
Oh,
So it's heartbreaking, but CAA will not stop until we get
no.
her to sanctuary and we get the village to enforce these humane laws that were proposed, passed, and put on the books for a reason.
And the most important thing that I'm hearing you say is, they're not budging, they don't care, they care about other issues, but you're not stopping because we will win for animals if we keep going. Out of all the social justice movements, they're all slow, all of them.
Very.
Animals are really slow. Animals can't stand up, they can't protest for themselves, they can't speak for themselves, and that's why we need to do it. We need more and more people to do it. So thank you for all of that and all of that extra education on, sad and bad things that are happening, but also the inspiration that we can all do something for these animals every single day. And that's what keeps me going too, is that I know I can do something every day because I can't sit still. I can't, just like you, we're so alike and we can't just do nothing. So is there anything else? I want to get to a couple of our questions we like to ask everybody.
Sure.
I am going to ask how people can get involved. We talked a little bit about that. Do you want to talk about that? next, or did you
Yes.
have something else you wanted to add? And you can.
We all also are working for Rocky the coyote,
Oh,
who
yes,
was
Rocky.
found in the Carolinas as a pup. I believe his eyes were not even open. The people who found him brought him to a local animal shelter, and they realized that he was a coyote pup. And somehow River Trail Nature Center, which is in the Cook County Forest Preserves, got their hands on him. They plopped him into a cage, and he's been there for more than 6 years or 7 years now.
Mm.
He is a pack animal. He doesn't have a pack. He's all alone, 24/7. They call his handlers his pack. They'll go in and they treat him like a dog. And because he was found as a pup and handled, he is like a dog and he's very closely related to a dog. So he has this need to have socialism. He loves when his handlers come in and pet him and give him treats and play with him like a dog. But then they're gone. So he might have approximately a half hour a day with his handlers. And then for 23 or maybe an hour, well, let's be generous, give him an hour with his handlers. But for 23 hours, he's alone and he's a pack animal. And they spent, I believe it was around $250,000 of Cook County tax dollars. I'm a Cook County taxpayer
Mm.
to expand his cage. So he's got a bigger cage, but they're not addressing the fact that he's all alone.
Right.
And in the winter, we have documented that he has barely any protection. He's got a plastic doghouse. One year we documented he had no straw in his doghouse. So we're still fighting. We have a sanctuary, the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado will take him free of charge. We'll do the transport. They'll do the transport. There'll be no charge to Cook County. But again, they're not letting him go. So I just wanted to mention that campaign. And it's another very
Thank you.
sad situation.
Thank you. Thank you for making people aware of all of these things, because a lot of times we're not aware of them. Patrick and I always talk about confinement being one of the worst cruelties. Is
Yes.
have imagine if you at home listening, or one, or you or I are just in a closet for 23 hours a day. We did nothing wrong, nothing to deserve them. The animals did nothing to deserve this. And especially, and there is a safe haven for them. There is sanctuaries and rescue groups that can make these animals' lives better.
And
And
Spur has been in this display case for more than 30 years.
that's awful.
And it's a pet store, so they play like rock and roll. Now, I'm a huge rock and roller, but she's a tortoise and all she has is like rock and roll and artificial light 24/7.
And what is her life expectancy?
She can live up to 100 years, give or take. And we believe her age is around 40. So if nothing's done, she could languish in this cage for another 60 years, give or take.
It's awful. And these are hard stories to listen to, but we want people to remember that it's important to fight for these animals and to not just give up or throw your hands up. We are all disgusted with humanity time and again because of the suffering that animals go through, which leads me to my next question. It's a weird segue for it, but it's a little bit inspiring. Our mission for this podcast is to educate people about animal issues, to inspire people to fight for animals. And even though it's hard, heartbreaking work. So I like to ask each one of our guests this. What do you do? We like to talk about balance. So what do you do? And how do you balance your life with activism? What do you do for fun? How do you take breaks? And how do you, most importantly, avoid burnout?
A great question. Well, if you're friends with me on Facebook, you probably know I love rock and roll.
I know a little bit about you, but you
I
do.
actually don't make a lot of money, but I win a lot of concert tickets because I try. And if I don't win them, I usually buy the cheapest ticket. But music, it's not just rock and roll, actually. I love all kinds of music. I love the theater. I love show tunes.
Wow.
I go to concerts and I go to a lot of musicals with my mom. That's our thing together. And it makes me happy. It takes me away from the suffering, away from the thinking about the suffering.
Mm.
But I mean, my life is dedicated to the animals. I will always go to a rock concert or do things on my free time because I do not want to get burned out. And and if you are listening and you're an activist, I want to say one thing. Some things people will say is, "Oh, I can't look at that. I can't read about that. I can't listen to that because I'll just think about it forever.
Mhm.
And I get that because I remember when I first got involved in the movement, there were certain things, well, many things, but a couple of things where I could not stop thinking about it when I first learned about this kind of suffering.
Mhm.
But I will tell you, the more you learn about it and the more you take action, the stronger you will become. Because if a lot of people feel helpless and hopeless about these issues, but when you take action, you don't you that feeling of hopelessness and helplessness starts to fade away.
Mhm.
So again, that 1 minute action, whether no matter what your cause is, I mean, there whatever you want to fight for. And even if it's not animals, I mean, if you are fighting for the environment or LGBTQ or, whatever issue, if you take a little action every day, that will make you feel more stronger.
Yes, it's
And
empowering. Yes.
it's empowering. Yes. And so I urge everybody to do that because doing nothing will definitely not help and complaining will definitely not help. So, wait, one thing that bothers me, and everybody can complain and vent, I do all the time. But if you're going to vent, do action too, because
Right.
taking action helps. Complaining doesn't. I'm not saying shouldn't vent and get it all out, but at least try to take action once a day for the cause that you're passionate about.
Yeah, and it is empowering and it feels good. It feels good to make those phone calls. It feels good to stand with a protest sign. It feels good to be active in doing something because you're doing something. We feel
Right.
helpless, we feel hopeless, but we know. So thank you for that. And I think it's so important for people to not get burned out. And I think that's why we're kind of taking that head on as we're trying to inspire people to be active. We want them to know, there's ways to get away from it too. You don't
Yeah.
have to watch slaughter videos over and over and over. Once
Right.
you know, then just work to end it.
Right.
Right.
And most of my DAAs are not, they don't show a lot of gratuitous cruelty. And then you don't ever have to click on anything. I mean, again, sometimes we'll say, please share this video, and you can copy and paste the link, but you don't have to watch it yourself. And I want to say this I don't want to forget it,
Yes.
is when we worked on our campaign in Chicago,
Hmm.
I, I think I mentioned we all worked full time. There were only, when we started the DAAs, maybe a handful of people doing them, maybe five at the most. And I had three other women. I want to mention them: Barbara, Paula, and Claudia were my three main activists. I had others who helped, who came to our protests and educational outreach. But the main people who worked on it regularly with documenting violations, testifying before city council, were four people. So you don't need the strength of a major animal rights organization to get these grassroots campaigns done. You can win them. We won in 2.5 years with four main people doing like the heavy lifting in a sense.
Yeah.
We had people come to outreach, we had people do the DAAs, but you can do it with a few people. Two people can do this. And
Yes.
I'm certain of that.
Yes. I love your passion, your dedication, and you keep going and you go to the rock concerts in between. And I do see a lot on Facebook that you win tickets. I'm gonna have to because you make the call. See, you can even
People say,
if you're
you know,
relentless in making calls, you win tickets. You're relentless in making calls, you can end animal exploitation. So there
in
you
the
go.
in the last month, I have had two, my boyfriend and another friend win tickets because I couldn't.
Wow.
Excuse me, I said call, and they did, and they won.
And they want
People say all the time, they're like, "You're so lucky. Of course you won." And I'm like, "When was the last time you called?"
right, right, right.
But that's the thing. It's kind of like
If you don't do
activism.
it, if you don't try, you can't do it, right? It won't
Yes,
happen.
exactly,
That's
exactly.
right. So I'm sure we're going to have you back, Jody. Thank you so much. This was a great conversation.
Thank you.
We'll have links to everything we talked about and whatever else you'd like to add. We'll put that in the show notes for everyone to see. And thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for all you do for animals.
Thank you. And thank you for everything you do and Patrick and Horse Racing Wrongs does. I help you as much as I can. And I'll be there with you too until we ban horse racing around the world.
One team. for the animals, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you so
And work
much.
together, that's important too is, work with even if you don't like someone, work with them because you're not doing it for them, you're doing it for the animals.
Yes, yes. Always put those personal things aside and just
Yeah.
stay focused. And that's how we help animals every single day. So thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Hey, Nicole here from In Behalf of Animals. We hope you love our show as much as you love animals. And if you do, can you take a quick action to help amplify their voices? Simply follow our podcast and write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you are listening right now. It helps new listeners discover the show to learn more about how they can join our community and help animals too. Thank you for listening, and remember to be their voice every chance you get.